Welcome to a special episode of Beyond Four Walls, where we delve into the world of property management and wellbeing. In this episode with Shelley Jacobs and Rob Curtis, we're opening up an important conversation about neurodiversity. From ADHD to autism, dyslexia to dyspraxia, our industry is full of brilliant minds that don't all think the same way. We'll explore what this means in practice, how neurodivergent strengths can be a huge asset in block management, where systems, detail and problem solving are key, and equally how we can create environments that support different ways of thinking rather than forcing everyone into the same mould. This conversation is about understanding, inclusion and unlocking potential. So Shelley, for anyone who isn't aware of neurodiversity, how would you define it, and is there a personal or professional experience that you could share or you could help us with?
So very broadly, neurodiversity, if you think about the word diversity of differences in people, and neuro is the brain bit, so it's cognitive differences or thinking differently. And the way that I think, some people have got Mac brains, some people have got PC brains, or some people have Apple phones or Android phones. They do something else, but different operating systems, that's how I sort of think about it. So it's really the broad population of people where some people are neurotypical in their brain functioning and some people are neurodivergent where their brain functioning is slightly different.
Okay. And do you have a personal experience about how you became aware of neurodiversity?
Yeah. So, okay, a bit of a long story, but my brother, who he from a young age was, back in those days, labelled as hyperactive. So, that sort of quintessential naughty little boy, zooming around. But in those days, it was called hyperactive. Being hyperactive, today we refer to as ADHD. He's also dyslexic. So growing up, I was aware of it from a family perspective. And then somewhere along the journey, it occurred to me that I was probably autistic. And then I thought, I wonder if maybe I'm a bit ADHD as well, because although I'm not zooming around that sort of quintessential ADHD presentation, I thought, I struggle a lot with organisational stuff, executive functioning. And then last year I decided to go through the assessment process and it confirmed that I am both autistic and have ADHD. So that's my sort of personal bit into the neurodiversity story as well.
Okay, and Rob, where does your neurodivergent journey begin?
Oh, get a bottle of red wine.
Absolutely.
So for me, listen to your brother, your story then just about your brother, I was exactly the same. My mum and dad put me in every sports club going, which I loved because everything was just 100 miles an hour. There wasn't anything I didn't do. And I was never really a naughty kid or anything like that, but it wasn't almost just being hyperactive, full of beans, loads of energy, and stuff like that. And it was only probably about 9 or 10 years ago now, one of my best friends who works in the education sector literally made a joke to me about, you sure you've not got ADHD? And I kind of went, well, what's that? I heard it on The Simpsons once when I was a kid, but that was about it. And from there, it just intrigued me. I went into this natural world that I now know as the ability to hyperfocus, and things just rolled from there. But I tried to go through the process by the book, so to speak, obviously doing doctors and looking for referrals and pieces. And sadly, I'm still waiting for the call back to kind of arrange that first appointment. But it was only lost years now, 2022. 2022. I actually was in a position to go private and do it and sort of jump on that bandwagon. And for me, it's been enlightening. I take medication, and what it's truly done is help me control myself emotionally. I think is the biggest thing, because I think there's stomach issues that I've had over the years that relate to these sorts of things, and from stress that I'm putting upon myself, how I react, how I feel about certain scenarios, and even just the worry. It's been a lovely journey. I think I first I really decided to go and do this because when I launched my business, I felt that natural overwhelm, right? And I thought, well, maybe this is the gap I'm missing. And I would definitely say, yeah, it's been a calming journey since being diagnosed and things like that as well, which is nice. And I think I always almost live in, not necessarily regret, I think that's the wrong word, but an element of, I wonder what I would have been like 10 years ago if I'd been able to get that access, that support. And because, as I said, I take medication, but I also do some private one-to-ones with a therapist and things like that, and I'm just learning so much. And I think once you actually, we never take time as humans to kind of truly reflect and stuff, but giving myself that outlet to do that really helps me think about not just, brilliant, I've got this magic pill that I take every day that makes me feel wonderful, but actually I'm there going, okay, I can recognise how I'm feeling, I'm thinking, whatever I'm doing, and I can not necessarily always control it, because you shouldn't crunch all your emotions into a little box or anything, but I can be in control of it, so to speak. And I think one of the biggest things for me is that ability to, like I said, it's that level of calmness that I probably still don't present as, but definitely in comparison to my head, this is the cool, calm, calculated version.
And a level of acceptance as well, I guess. You've got that answer, you've got that sense of belonging, potentially. You've got that understanding of why you react in certain ways, or why you might see something and it might not, the person next to you might think, why are you reacting like that? It's not a big deal. When actually, it is a big deal. It's a really big deal.
100%. My wife for years used to, it was our favourite joke for many years, because she knew that if she really wanted the kitchen like redoing, as in like scrubbed out, clean all the pot, like clear all the back of the cupboards. Yes, that was my thing. And I
wish that was.
It's totally
wish it was. Me, it's the opposite. That's my idea of hell.
What she would do is unload the dishwasher or something like that, and she will literally pop up a couple of pans in a different spot. So then, bearing in mind I am no chef, but I would obviously go in the kitchen, like, something would fall out, like, oh, this rubbish! That's it, all the cupboards are out, everything is being refiled, reorganised a lot. And yeah, still to this day, she tries it, but now I'm a bit like,
I know what you're doing.
Reorganised kitchen. You are welcome to my
I'm available for hire.
Just leave something out of place. But Shelley, what are some of the most common neurodivergent conditions that people might experience?
So typically we're talking about things like, as we've just said, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. So there's quite a lot of neurodevelopmental conditions that fall under that. But there are also other things in a very broad context of brain differences, which are things like OCD, bipolar, epilepsy, even things like PTSD. So in the sort of more clinical definition, it's more those neurodevelopmental challenges that are present from birth. But in a broader context, a lot of people are bringing other conditions into it because they are about differences in brain processing.
So I personally have EDD, so emotional dysregulation. I've only found out about it the last year, I would guess. You lose all track of time, don't you? But yeah, probably the last year. And actually, it's that click, isn't it? It's that, well, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense why I react to certain things in certain ways and that sort of thing. But also, as much as I went down one road of, I did shame spiral for a while and just thought, well, people are just going to think I'm an absolute crazy person. But actually, I'm not. All the time, anyway.
Just enough.
But I do have heightened emotions. And that's, happiness as well as sadness, as well as anger, as well as, everything else that comes with it. But it doesn't define you. It's just
it helps
something
you
that
to
helps understand you. Why I would get, I was bullied badly during my school years, still affects me now. And I probably was born with this condition. It's just that I didn't know about it. But if I did know about it when I was a kid, would that bullying have affected me as much as it did? Could I have got more help at the time? Would I have been more understood in school? All of those kind of things, you know. And would people understand me more now if they knew that actually their actions can cause me to go very quickly?
Yes, and it's not almost it's not an attack at them. It's actually just you. The fact that you're trying to go, okay, I need to handle these things. What's going on? It's really funny, obviously, when you're just talking, sort of listing out sort of various ailments, let's call it, but eventually. But that when I was younger, I was a young dad, and 19 when I was born, and my eldest, and then we completely bought our house all before I turned 20. So it was all pretty nuts, and I obviously had some challenges to overcome and pieces. I was diagnosed with sort of depression and put on these different medications and pieces. And then obviously as I began to learn about this whole process and obviously having accessibility to information, it was me just saying, well, actually, that's just one part of me versus, okay, cool. Now, actually, if I can keep myself in a position almost, like I said, of being in control of or having a major control of how I think or how I process my thinking and feelings, then actually that's a very different conversation. I remember the medication I was taking at the time, and I felt it was very surreal because I felt so numb and void. Whereas when I went through this process again for the ADHD, I had this fear that was going to be the same platform, and I was a bit like, I like being me. I like my personality, but to have that sort of feeling, and it was a complete polar opposite, and it was really interesting to have gone through that and learn. Obviously now being older, maturer maybe, but to kind of actually reflect on it and see that gap as well.
But it's having the right tools, whether it's medication or the right habits or better habits for whatever you're going through. And one of the things I often think about with neurodivergent people is if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. Everyone is so unique, and what they need to help them is very different from person to person. But if you're dealing with the wrong help, it's going to ultimately be unhelpful, and getting the right things for them to be quite transformative.
Yeah, so true, so true.
Shelley, how do you think awareness around neurodiversity has changed over the years?
So I think that, if you think about the brain, it's quite hard to study the brain, right? Because we're alive and running around. But we know so much more about neurodiversity now. So there's just that broader awareness. So back in the day, I feel like I've used that expression once. Back in the day, we just didn't know, and kids at school were labelled as weird or naughty or disruptive or quiet or socially, or all of those labels that are the wrong labels. But today we understand that not all of those kids are neurodivergent, but some of them are. So we know a lot more than we did, but also a lot of the presentations and the sort of assessment criteria were based on male presentation. We know now that women present differently, so we're starting to see so many women, particularly sort of in their 30s, 40s and beyond, being diagnosed. There's a lot of late diagnosis for all adults, but particularly women who, we now understand present differently. So there's a massive difference in what we know now than even 10 years ago. And also social media has got an interesting part to play in the story, because there's so many people talking about it. You can't literally go onto Instagram or even LinkedIn or whatever without somebody talking about something. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. But I think that's also highlighting to people, I wonder if, and that's my experience as well. With autism, it was slightly different. I always knew I was very shy, very socially awkward. But on the ADHD side, it was probably through social media that I started to hear people talking about it. And I thought, actually, that rings a bell, and I do that. And yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's also important to think about, seeing the right people. But as you mentioned, and I had the same experience, I phoned up my GP to go through the diagnostic process. And it was, no offence to GPs, but it was just literally the GP said, I don't actually know how to put you forward for a referral. And I thought, okay, so private it is then, and that's quite expensive. And, and I went down the private route as well. And a lot of people are having to do that. And the challenge with that is you've got waiting lists, 7 years for ADHD diagnosis. Anyway, I'm going down the rabbit hole, but yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. But are there any misconceptions, do you think, that still exist Rob, be a good one for you. Any misconceptions around neurodiversity? Actually, before you answer this, Shelley and I were actually talking earlier about, everyone's a bit ADHD these days. I hear that so much, and it's just so wrong, and it's just not true. And it goes back to what you said then about the fact that, women, certainly women who are potentially, going into menopause as well, and that sort of thing, hormones are changing, and, there's all of there's so much going on. You can't just have this blanket, everyone's a bit that these days kind of thing. But can you challenge that at all?
So I think you're right. I think there is very much, I'm an open book. I'll happily talk about anything about myself or whatever, pose questions away. And when people do ask me those things, I do that. And I'm like, and I sit there and I kind of feel, yeah, but you're talking about maybe some of the, I'd coin it as like the steady bits, or I forgot to message someone back. I know I'm guilty for that one. But, thank you. But it's those sorts of pieces of just being the realities of life versus actually there is, if I coined it as a bit of a darker side, it's a bit blue, but a much heavier kind of struggle than we certainly, I would definitely join us all together as ADHDs at this point, but there's more of a struggle than we as individuals would most certainly let on, I feel, and because it's up there consistently, 7 different people type conversations at all times with all different scenarios and pieces like that to navigate. But I think you touched on earlier, Shelley, that one of the, just because you're ADHD, it doesn't mean you tick all of these boxes. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple of friends that are very much on my bus, so to speak, and it's really funny how some of the small little nuanced things, we are so the polar opposite. And it could be the difference between, in the office, having the need to wash up versus not. It sounds really silly, but same every day. One of my friends is, I'm just going to do washing up. And I'm like, I can't wait till tomorrow. I've got other things to focus on. And those sorts of pieces, but actually there's that nagging thought and feeling that goes through that. But I think, that would kind of be my two pieces on it really would be about actually there is such a heavier, there's a heavier load than I think the majority of neurotypical or anybody else that doesn't necessarily experience ADHD on a day-to-day basis has to deal with. There's a lot of it's running a marathon with a 50-kilo backpack a lot of the time, mm-hmm. And I think our natural sort of energy and buzz, and because we can pop around and have a bit, we're very common, or certainly I know I am, and even through people that I know with similar diagnosis, but actually that's only a small part of it.
Yeah,
there's a big one.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that we need to move away from these labels, if you like, and focus more on individuals and their strengths, and rather than just focusing on the fact that you've got ADHD or you're autistic or EDD or anything like that, just focus on the person and focus on their strengths rather than ultimately what they might have they might have a confidence issue with the fact that they may see it as a weakness, potentially. Shelley, what do you think of that?
I think labels play an interesting part. I think that people have the wrong labels, and most people, particularly late diagnosed people, have a whole bunch of the wrong labels growing up, be it, personally, shy, lazy, selfish, weird, that list goes on. And those are the wrong labels. I like the fact that I now have the right label. Mm-hmm. That helps me to understand myself and people around me, and helps me to understand what I need to function better in the world. So I personally don't have an issue with the labels of the conditions, as it were. But there is a challenge with labels in that people sometimes play up to those labels. I can't do that because of, blah, blah, blah. And that's not a great thing either. And I know that parents thinking about diagnosing, having their kids diagnosed, have that issue of not wanting their kids to play into that whole labelling. But I think that I personally would rather have the right label. I do think in the future we're going to have very different conversations around neurodivergent language, and I do wonder, I almost want to zoom forward sort of 15 years to see how are we even referring to ourselves in the future. And I think that as time goes on, more and more people become, aware of what's going on in their own mind. And I think that the language will change, but I don't know
I
what
think
that will look like.
no, so it's a really good point because I think in one respect it's really powerful because actually when you do feel in your worst and rubbish of moments and you can find somebody to align with, be that as you mentioned earlier, it's like social media posts. It could just be X person you follow. Yeah, that's my gentle reminder. I'm in my club, so to speak. There's other people out there that are facing the same battles and challenges, but at the same time, I think you're right. There are so many people. I see lots of examples, kind of like I said, oh yeah, I must have a bit of that. Um, so many people that do blame it on it. I think I've always tried to be quite jovial, and I almost probably a bit too negative a lot of the times on myself, which is probably quite natural. But more about poking fun at myself. Oh, sorry, I completely forgot. Isms. Yeah, there's whatever joke I can muster up at the time. Just because I make that joke at the same time, though, I still feel horrific. Like the because of Ace and I forgot to message somebody, or I forgot to feed the dog this evening, or whatever it is. I play that card to almost cease the sort of scenario to sort of calm things down, but still at the same time having that weight on my shoulder. But I think it's such. I feel that you do see, and kind of as you said earlier, that good and bad on socials is, like I said, it's really great because you have this community vibe. But then I think at the same time, you're sat there going, okay, cool, this person's almost TikTok-esque of I'm in it for the money. What can I sell you?
Yeah.
Instead of actually, cool, this is, which of course, if you can make a product that is something you care about, absolutely you're entitled to it. But it's trying to find that delicate balance of whether people are transparent of why they're communicating, right?
Yeah, I think there's some really good people talking about it, but there's also a lot of misinformation. And it's one of those topics where everyone thinks that they're an expert. And I don't profess to be an expert, I'm just a human who is neurodivergent. And I have an interest in supporting people in the workplace in lots of guises. But yeah, I think it's understanding, who the good people are to listen to, and to also do your own research if it's something that impacts and influences you as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about the workplace there. Do you think that there should be, is probably a bit of a strong word, but should there be training for managers? Are there enough managers that understand the neurodivergent space? Should it be should there be more support there for staff? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that the role of a manager is not there to diagnose or to label staff. I think that good managers should treat people as individuals, regardless of whether they're neurotypical, neurodivergent. How do I get this person in front of me to work at their personal natural best? And what does that look like? And that will look different for every human, regardless of their neurotype. But I do think what's important in the workplace is that we appreciate that people have different needs. Again, regardless of what that is, just as an example, people might be sensitive to noise, people might need to prep for meetings beforehand because their cognitive functioning might be a bit impacted in a meeting situation because they might be quite nervous. There's that typical thing of people who have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, so perceived forms of rejection. So as a manager, if you say to somebody, can I have a chat with you? People might think, well, I'm going to get fired. So actually providing context to that sort of thing. I could go on and on. There's so many things in the workplace. So I think it's about managers and leaders being aware of those kinds of things. It's important to be open to the concept of reasonable adjustments. What we're seeing at the moment is a massive influx of employment tribunal cases relating to neurodivergent people who have requested adjustments, and those adjustments have been denied, and they are deemed reasonable. So one of those cases, there was somebody who is dyslexic, and he had some executive functioning challenges, waking up in the morning, so reading the alarm clock, and then thinking about all the steps that are required in the morning to get out of bed, get ready, I'm not good in the morning myself, so I can relate. And he asked for 15 minutes flexibility in the morning, and he was denied that. And the tribunal he won his case basically because it was deemed it was reasonable. And I think it's something that employers need to really consider, that people have the right to reasonable adjustments, and reasonable is reasonable. Some things may not be reasonable, but that shouldn't be viewed as a negative. It should be viewed as a positive to support people in what they need to function in the workplace. And I think that there's quite a bit of negativity around that as a concept. And the other thing to say on that is that employees don't need to have formal diagnosis to request reasonable adjustments, particularly, as I mentioned, 7 years to get an ADHD diagnosis. If people identify as being neurodivergent and they can express why they're struggling with something specific, then that should be considered. So they don't need that formal diagnostic criteria.
How did you find it when, pre-diagnosis, pre-business owner? How did you find the workplace yourself?
So I was sat here chuckling, listening to everything you were just saying there. I'm there going, yep, that felt like, yep, I had that, I had that, I had that, I had that, I had that. I was really lucky in one of my roles where I felt like I grew up in that business, and my boss, she's still a friend of mine, she's a dear friend of mine still to this day, and we clashed heads probably for about a year when I first started, and again, not even thinking about all of this stuff in life, and I wouldn't necessarily align it directly to sort of how I'm wired, let's say, but all of a sudden, I felt in the process, obviously I've reciprocated this at some point to gain some trust, let's say, back with her at the time, and I felt like she just got me, and she realised, let me rephrase that, I think she recognised kind of, okay, that's what makes Rob tick. And to be able to work with her then onwards was fantastic. All of a sudden I found I progressed in the company. I did so many different things. We're part of a bigger company, a large global company at the time, and I got to sort of integrate within some of those businesses and pieces like that. And she will always be my favourite ever boss. It will never change. She was an absolute legend. And I learned she almost gave me some of those things that I didn't actually realise I needed. So you were talking earlier about like preparation. So I did a Prince 2 project management when I was in about 21, 22, I think. And she wanted to navigate me on that journey. She realised I could do lots of cool things, and she just wanted to enable me to develop myself. And my first fear went, oh, I hate tests. I hate exams. I cannot sit in this room. Right. So I went up to London the first time to do it, and I built myself up. I got so stressed in my head, not just smiling and nodding as I'm like still trying to find what answers I'm supposed to be checking off. But going through that process, I completely messed it up. And I found out a couple of days later, and I was I remember this, I was heartbroken because I've let her down. She's given me all these things, and her response was, don't worry about it, we'll sort out another day, we'll get you back up. And instead of rushing up to London last minute, what you do, the day before, you're in the office, that'll be a quiet week was her words. Spend some time, go into one of the meeting rooms, just go over anything you need, just see to feel good. You need to look, touch and feel things, don't you, Rob? I was like, yeah, oh, that'd be brilliant. She was like, on the day, I know your exam's not till like 3, it was a Friday, it was brutal, but not till 3, just go up in the morning, don't bother coming to the office in the morning, get up there, I know what you're going to do, you're going to take the books, you're going to cram, you're going to stress, but just go and have a little bimble. And I turned up, had a little bimble around Islington, around London, met one of the tattoo artist shows. It was like London Ink. I walked in there and had a lovely chat. Forgot about everything else. Turned up, smashed this exam, walked back out, result back, same day, passed it a lot. And I think that always comes back to me as in, at that time, there was no training necessarily for even identifying these things. Jesus, I didn't even know. But that ability to almost use common sense. That's sometimes what it feels like to me, of just being able to say, okay, cool, like, you think I need to just how can I tweak my process to work with you?
Take the time to figure out what worked for you to work at your best.
100%. And then I moved on and went to a more corporate life that I thought I was destined for, and sadly not. I realised I was very much a square peg in a round hole of thinking, doing, but also just how, like, almost reacting to how people would act with me. I felt so alien, and I've never ever had that before. To the point of, are the words coming out of my mouth actually coming out of my mouth or not? Am I saying something different? There is a complete translation difference in how I say, think, feel, do, versus how people are interacting with me. And I think, again, my boss at that time was a lovely gentleman, but probably a little bit more old-fashioned, let's say. So those sorts of conversations certainly weren't there. And yeah, it was incredible now to almost think about how you can go from one place to another and have such a difference. Like, I was at that point in that role, I ended up off ill with stress, and well, it was with stomach issues, gut issues, and all these sorts of things, ulcers, and all this sort of jazz. And obviously now I've learned, yeah, okay, there's definitely a level of stress where actually all I was doing in that role was my best, and I was doing, touch wood, a good job, but just actually how I was made to feel and how I had to behave. So where I would need a coffee and a wee, let's say, and things like that, it was so tough to just have that. Oh, okay, well, I'm away from the chaos. I'm in a big room full of 400 people. Oh, Jesus, where do I go? How do I get away from this without just look like I'm sat on the toilet on my phone all day? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it was like felt almost like very childish in comparison. It was just so bizarre. But yeah, scary stuff.
So, Shelley, how do you think managers could approach these conversations but without being abusive to somebody?
I think it's literally about, as you were saying about your boss, the good boss, learn what somebody needs regardless of anything. And, ultimately, I think employees need to ask for what they need as well and be quite specific where they can. But it is just about that human connection, and recognising that everybody's unique, everybody needs different things to work at their best, trying to figure out the right things for people. And I think as long as managers are asking questions like, what do you need from me? What can I do to support you better? What will help you the most in this moment if someone's particularly stressed or whatever? Those kinds of questions. Ask great questions or learn how to ask great questions. And also, the most important thing, don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions that, just because somebody might say, I have ADHD, as you said earlier on, people present differently. I have an inattentive form, so I need to work on my focus. I'm not that sort of bouncing off the walls physically, but my brain is whirring like a washing machine. So, I need a quieter environment. For me, being in a noisy environment is just carnage. So, that's me. Thankfully, I have an office I can shut the door. I'm very grateful for that. But, it's so really the intrusive part. It's only intrusive if you ask bad, ill-thought-out questions and are not empathetic, or asking questions with a tone of judgment, or a tone of, oh, I don't want to have to think about what you need. I just want you to get your job done. The job could get done so much better if there's better connection and asking great questions around what can I do to support you.
Yeah, and is there an education element around that then? Is there something that managers should or shouldn't, necessarily, but that there should there be something out there that is an educational tool for you're either empathetic or you're not, I think, to a certain extent. However, is there something that could be put in place for managers as part of professional development or something like that to just have a more inclusive culture within their organisations?
I think broadly, and again, I'm generalising on purpose. I don't think it's an educational piece specifically around different types of people. I think it's about being a kind, empathetic human, regardless. And yes, there is a lot to learn about neurodivergent people and what they might be going through. But again, we don't want to stereotype people or pigeonhole people. So I think the skills, and I do believe leadership is a skill. The skill is listening well, active listening. We talk about that. It's one of those underrated qualities in leadership. Asking great questions, finding out what that person needs. I think that, to me, that's the educational piece. And most managers are put into those roles because they're good at doing a job, but then nobody teaches them how to be a good manager. So I think the educational piece is just about great leadership skills, which are about human things.
So how do you think we can support neurodivergent individuals who are self-employed or running their own business? We'll go to you first, and then we can say something after.
Well, got so many ideas running through my head. So I think, so for me, I deal a lot with sort of, let's call it front of house clients, sex journey, etc. And I love doing that because it ticks lots of dopamine boxes for the goods, the bads, and the uglies. Amen. But then also at the same time, almost one of my own challenges is I am me, and I'll keep joking about a message or something hasn't happened or those mistakes. But I've always felt very lucky because I've never been shy about myself, about trying to sit and just say, well, let me, Mr. or Mrs. Client, let me tell you all about my life story. But as I build relationships with my clients, those sort of human elements, those human errors, because again, we are all human. It's sorry, Rob, that's fine, because they know how I feel. They know it's not I've never bothered to do this. I don't care. It's it's a genuine human error type. But I think there's the other side to it. It's not just being leader of the business type piece. It's how can I make sure I'm enabling my team in what I'm doing? So even when I think about the agency, it's, as you quite rightly said, it's communication. I think Simon Sinek quoted it as that kind of leaders eat last type of mentality. And I think for me, there is no form, right? There is no checkbox. There is no lovely little Google form to be able to say, okay, cool. If you think somebody's demonstrating these signals and signs, complete this, or what do you need? Answer those questions, right? So I think for me, it's about understanding, or being able to at least make a broader understanding of how people may think, feel, and do, I think. And I'm not saying it is a perfectly organized little form, but trying to actually raise that awareness of how people with different ailments, let's say, manage and deal with things, to be able to allow you, not for people that may be neurotypical, to be able to manage, to be able to deal with those people. I think it's no different than going home to my wife. Like, she's obviously always known I'm a pain in the neck, but I think as we've both gone through that journey of me being diagnosed, etc., and I think my own understanding, I've never truly understood and never truly seen just how much she does for me on a daily basis. And actually, those small little things she does saves a whole evening of stress, aggro, and all these sorts of pieces. But I think from the other side of it as well is you obviously have these things like access to work and stuff, and those sorts of elements. And I think, which I've gone through that process and getting some benefits from that. But at the same time, I hear so many different varying stories as I've got ABC. Oh, I think they didn't let me have that, and they didn't let me have that. And I think there's no, I'll say set guideline again, but there's no blueprint for somebody who's just doing their job, kind of going, well, I can't give you, you don't quite tick that box in my opinion. But then being somebody that is neurospicy, I'm sort of going, well, I would align ourselves, like me and you, as two very similar cogs, let's say. And how does that work? And how can you not get that, or how can I not get that? It doesn't quite make sense. And again, there is no perfect guidebook or perfect form, but I think there's certainly something that can be done legislatively that brings these pieces together, or brings everything a little bit closer in the journey.
Okay. And what do you think, Shelley? Because you run your own business as well, so...
Yeah, I mean, at the earlier part of my career, I worked for some very large companies, and I was just a little cog in a big machine. versus, working with my brother, and we're both neurospicy. And, I think when you look at a lot of people who run their own businesses, they are neurodivergent because working to other people's agenda or other people's rules can be really difficult. So I think, I have sat with a foot in both camps, working for someone else, working for myself. I prefer working for myself because I get to march to the beat of my own drum a little bit more. I get to show up at work as me and not, and whilst I do feel like I have quite a high level of masking day to day, I also get to be me more so than I would do if I was working for someone else because I can, and that's a good thing.
It makes such a good point, because I think there's a whole culture piece then in that conversation, isn't there, about actually being neurodiverse. Actually, I want to enable that. Like downstairs in our agency, we have the common joke of we've all got a massive set of headphones, which are our F-off headphones. So if you just want to get in the zone and you want to blank everybody out, put those in, nobody bothers you, unless the building burning down type approach. And just some silly little pieces like that that I found actually, even initially, it was, this benefits me. And then it could be as simple as, well, guys, if this benefits, if you like to do this as well, is there anything else you like? And actually found me such almost a good step to have that conversation without it being almost, I can't remember the language you used earlier, but without being so almost accidentally judgmental or not asking the right question. Exactly, that prescribed sort of process. And I found that was so silly little nuanced things, fidgets, all those sorts of bits that just make those small little differences to people's day.
Yeah, and it is about, recognising those little things where, things that you feel make you seem weird, making sure that people understand why those things are necessary, whether it's stimming, fidgeting, whatever, as you said, it's those things that, we might need to do, and that doesn't, that's just how we function.
And it also ticks the dopamine box because you get to help even more people. It's lovely.
So if a workplace were to be just accommodating, or rather than being accommodating, should I say, if they were it was all just fully embraced, it was the norm, there was no box to tick because to go through a process, to have to go through this, that or the other in order to get, it was just the way that it always is, if you like. What do you think that looks like?
So, my gut feeling. So obviously, there's a lot of conversation about obviously like work from home, work in an office. But I want to be in my own space and my safe space and my environment and pieces, which I've done both as an employee and as a business owner, and I think sometimes we can almost jump too far. I had a period of time where we were moving offices, and one lease ended, another lease didn't begin for a while, and we all work from home. And I realised actually this isolation element of this, it's actually not good for me. In one side, I'm like, I want to get into everything. The other side, I'm not seeing it at that point. But actually, apart from video calls, I've not seen a human for so many days. It feels like at times. But I think for me, if the world was perfect, almost, let's say in Rob's mind, I think the 9 to 5 changes, and I think that focus on adaptability for hours in a day spent, and that could be actually, I don't want a lunch break. I don't really care for a lunch break. Okay, cool. Let's navigate your day to make sure you still have appropriate rest time, and kind of those. To me, common sense trade, it might seem common sense in my head, but those tradables throughout that process is kind of the big thing for me of, okay, what do you need? Let's make it work. But also being the other side to that as the employee, I think there's also got to be this balance of, and again, having been through this journey by accident almost at the time, but okay, I can't have everything that I need. There's got like different businesses, different shapes and sizes. There's only so much money in small business worlds and things like that. It's okay, what can we do to make reasonable adjustments? I think the formal language, isn't it? But yeah, I think definitely the kind of the working hours journey, I think is something that I see changing a lot. not necessarily whether lots of businesses will get that right, but I think it's just giving people that adaptability to be able to go, yeah, cool, every hour, like we will get told by our health and safety experts, isn't it? Every hour, get away from your screen for 5 minutes, either always happens or never happens. But actually, okay, how can I adjust a date to make sure you are firing on all cylinders? It's pretty much a conversation I have with our guys. It's how can I make you the best version of you? Let's go. Or how can I support you in that process? But not sure what your thoughts are.
Similar, yeah. I mean, growing up, when I was younger, the early part of my career, I mentioned I'm not great in the mornings, executive functioning, it's complicated for me in the morning. But I spent my early part of my career with people kind of doing the tippy tappy watch thing when I was always routinely late for work. And now I don't have that. I get to wake up in the morning, and I still need to start work, broadly at 9 o'clock. But if I'm 10 minutes late, it's not, no one's going to tippy tap on a watch anymore, because I make up my time and then some and then some. But it's having that approach to, what works for me as an individual, and, creating a working environment where it's okay, and we embrace people's needs, that we have flexibility. Every day I can wake up and decide I want to work from home today or go into the office. I've got a set day that I do go into the office, but around that, I have that flexibility. So I'm the opposite, where I quite like working from home. It's peaceful, and I can focus. I could probably happily be on my own for weeks. That's okay. So I didn't know. I like being around people, just and I think it is about designing workplaces that are flexible and truly flexible to the needs of individuals. But obviously, some industry, like our industry in terms of property, there is that sort of conventional time, 9 to 5, of being contactable. So I think that it would be great to be solely output focused. Some industries don't lend themselves to that, and that's challenging. But yeah, being flexible, helping people to just be themselves in the workplace, and not make them feel that their behaviour is weird or unusual, or judging people in that way.
Yeah, and having trust in your employees as well. That they're just, you've employed them to do a job. You know that they can do a job. How they get that job done, to a certain degree, is up to them.
Yeah.
That obviously there's different companies have different rules, but at the same time, if you have trust in your employees, that you know that they're going to get the job done, they're going to treat the client with respect, they're going to, respond to that person. If they respond to that person at 11 o'clock in the morning rather than 9 o'clock in the morning, because they've got to just have that, you just need to sit and work through my stuff, but you have that trust in your employees that it's going to get done, then, it's just having that more, that trusting, inclusive, flexible workspace.
But it's amazing how many employers still do that thing of, I need to see the whites of people's eyes.
Yeah.
Well, no. Why do you need to? As you said, if somebody's getting their job done, who cares to some extent how that happens? I appreciate people need to answer the phone within a certain time, or all those practical work things, but the rest of it, I think flexibility is the key.
I think almost to play a little devil advocate within that process is that I think sometimes I'm very much a person of, you have my trust as soon as I meet you. You want the keys to my car, the keys to my no stress, have the lot. And I think I know that in life overall, but I think I've been stung in times of that, and I think I'm not going to change my philosophies of life. If I put good out there, it will always come back and round. And at the same time, though, it's actually somebody else may go, well, actually, the last time this happened in my business, I've given all my trust, I've been let down. So almost actually, as that new employee versus employer that's a bit burnt, let's say, as just two human beings, it's okay, we need to build that. We need to build that trust relationship, right? And how do you, again, it might probably another episode, but how do you broach that, navigate that as well? Because I think we do see a lot of stories. Like I said earlier, I love coming to the office because actually it works for my brain of going, right, there, I get home, the keys to go down, at least have my dinner before I play with the laptop again. But whereas others really just don't want to like not necessarily in our business, but I've heard lots of stories about lots of different businesses where people just don't want to do that, and it's might be a bit old-fashioned, but I've got to go and earn that trust first before I can almost get some of my wins. And it's again, it's interesting to always think about how the average human, let's say, kind of deals with that whole process as well.
But I think also, young people coming into the workplace today are used to being at home or having that autonomy and find the structure of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday week just doesn't work anymore. And if you think about it, that is a construct that humans invented. We invented the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday with a weekend. It didn't exist, when the world was invented or whatever. But, humans made that so. And humans get to change the status quo. And it's just being open to thinking about the work, not how the work is done.
Yeah. And if our listeners wanted to start a conversation in their own team or in their own workplaces, where do they start? Where does that begin? Shelley, we'll chuck that one at you tonight.
I think that really workplaces just need to start talking about neurodiversity in whatever guise. But if somebody wants to talk about it themselves in terms of what they're going through, I think it is just talking about it and feeling like it's okay. Those conversations have to start somewhere. And sometimes that can feel quite daunting, particularly if you're in a working environment where you think it may not be well received. So then perhaps it's about finding an ally and then building, those conversations. I don't know, Rob, what were your thoughts?
I think almost from a leader perspective, I think it always comes back to kind of the conversation we were having earlier of how can I want to be thinking for my team if I'm in a bigger business or whatever. Of okay, cool. How can you win? How can I help you win? Because in the scales of a bigger firm, you're all going to win. I'll win. We'll all win. Type process. It's a team mentality. But I think if you're that person, I think you kind of nailed it there, Shelley. It's about finding that safe. Let's call it a safe space, right? It's finding that safe space to be able to go and have those conversations. But I think, again, I'm going to come back to the leader piece in it. But how can I make sure there is that space for people? And I think I can't remember exactly the language I think you both mentioned earlier on, but around I think you can't train empathy. You can't learn that, and you can learn the process of making sure you're coming across a bit clearer and things like that. But I think you've either got that and you want to do that, I think is the key. But you want to make that space, that safe environment for people to be able to come and have that conversation with you. As well as then, I think it is about asking the element of let's say asking the right questions. It's how are you? I think is how are things? Oh, you don't seem. Should we go have a quick coffee? It's those sorts of things. You don't seem a bit like yourself at the moment. What's going on? Yeah, and if anything I can help, like how is that moving? And I think I think the human piece is what we all seem to forget we are at times.
Yeah, definitely. And if there could be one mindset shift in the workplace that would make the biggest impact, what do you think that would be, Rob?
We touched on this earlier, but I'd say don't tarnish every person with the same brush. We've already covered that one, but we all know how different every single human is in this neurodiverse space. But you can certainly benefit from learning, okay, Rob seems to work this way. I've had experience working with Rob. Okay, how can I take my learnings from there and dealing with somebody else that may show similar traits, signs, or maybe openly talk to you about it? But asking those questions and don't judge before you actually know, I think is probably a big piece for me.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, don't judge people, don't stereotype people. I'm going to repeat myself, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. So forget about what you think you know. Learn about this person in front of you. Who are they? What are their challenges? How can I support them? How can I help them? And yeah, just don't take all the stereotypes because everyone's unique. And that's not just about neurodiversity.
That's
We've all-
everyone.
Yeah, that's everyone,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, that's personality, and we all have shared similarities, individual differences, and it's about understanding people as individuals, regardless of anything else.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.